It's time for Security Now. Steve Gibson is here with a little rant. Why is it so hard to figure out what machines Windows 11 will run on? It's just Windows 10, right? We'll also talk about the My Book Live hack. The true story is getting kind of interesting. And then why did it cost Ireland $600 million to fix that ransomware attack? It's all coming up next on Security Now.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Security Now with Steve Gibson, episode 825, recorded Tuesday, June 29th, 2021. Halfway through 2021. Security Now is supported by AT&T Active Armor. We rely so much on our phones these days and are always on them, whether it's live streaming content, catching up with family on weekly video calls, or watching your favorite podcast. There's no room for fraud calls. Thankfully, AT&T makes customer security a priority, helping block those pesky calls. It's not complicated. AT&T Active Armor, 24/7 proactive network security and fraud call blocking to help stop threats at no extra charge. Compatible device and service required. Visit att.com/activearmor for details. It's time for the Dweebcast. That's a good name. You've just renamed the show. I'm talking Security Now with this guy right here, the king of the dweebs. That's a mean thing to say. Steve Gibson.
That's better than the myth. I think I like that.
The man, the myth, the legend.
Yeah.
Oh, I never thought about that. There is no myth. It's all reality, right?
We are going to be talking about a legend of the computer industry who we lost last week.
Oh.
That was after the podcast finished. So anyway, we got a lot to talk about for episode 825. Actually, we're closing in on the end of year 16, Leo. So
hush your mouth. I don't want to get to $9.99 anytime soon.
No, that's going to be a dilemma. Anyway, we are with the finish of this podcast halfway through 2021, thus the name of today's podcast. We're going to look at the interesting story behind a very important Edge update and how some rent got paid. We're going to revisit Google's now delayed, FLoC flop. We're going to consider the cost of Ireland's recovery from the Conti ransomware attack, which I think is very suspicious. It's like got to be the most expensive expectation we've seen. Also ask who's responsible for the damage and data loss following the remote wiping of so many Western Digital MyBook NAS devices. We're going to take a moment to observe the passing of an industry legend. Then we look at, you know who that is, and then we look at the mess surrounding questions of where Windows 11 will run. And I even heard Andy touching on that during MacBreak Weekly. I'm going to share, just because it occurred to me, I was using it so much yesterday, my favorite web browser keyboard shortcut, and I also used this yesterday earlier, my favorite website cloning tool. Maybe that was on Sunday. Anyway, I just had the occasion to use it again. I thought I got to make sure everybody knows about this because it just works. And it turns out that's not an easy thing to find. We also have a worthwhile looking cybersecurity humble bundle. And then I want to wrap up by responding to two pieces of closing the loop feedback from our terrific listeners, which, as I said, will bring us to the end of the first half of an event-filled 2021. And, of course, we do have a great picture of the week, apropos of one of our topics.
I haven't glanced at it yet, just in case it's
we're gonna have
something
fun.
Surprising.
Don't be drinking any coffee while you look at it. You may spit it out.
Uh-oh.
That's right.
You made me spit my milk through my nose again. That's why we should rename you, and this was a suggestion from the chat room. The man, thanks to Logan 5, the man, the mirth, and the legend. How about that?
Now that I can go
Yes,
with.
yes. More with the man, the mirth, and the legend in just a bit.
Logan.
Our show today brought to you by AT&T Active Armor. We rely so much on our phones these days. We live on them, don't we? And whether it's live streaming content, catching up with the family on weekly video calls. I do that every week. Watching us, your favorite podcast. there's no room while you're using it in all these wonderful ways for fraud calls. Last thing I need is a call saying your auto warranty is about to expire. It's got to the point where you don't even want to answer the phone anymore. Well, that's why you need AT&T. AT&T, thankfully, makes customer security a priority, helping block those pesky calls. It's not complicated. AT&T Active Armor, 24/7 proactive network security and fraud call blocking to help stop threats, all at no extra charge. Compatible device and service required. Visit att.com/activearmor for details. I got the other day, I got a call, not on my AT&T phone because I don't get those, but on my T-Mobile phone, saying they've changed the tune. Instead of your auto warranty is about to expire, I guess they realized that people knew that was bogus. So they said, how would you like to extend your auto warranty? No, I just bought that car. I don't need to. Boy, it's just it really, these fraudulent calls are just.
Well, Leo, I have been I was one of the last holdouts for landlines. I had twisted pair copper, and I'd had the phone number forever and ever, and unfortunately, apparently everybody else had it too, and I stopped answering it.
You can't answer it.
It was completely ridiculous, absolutely out of control.
Robocall crazy,
Yeah.
We should sometime do a show on the technology of these things, because the reason it took off is because you could do it for free, basically.
Yes, exactly. Remember when we were growing up, we were not allowed to dial outside of our area code.
It cost money.
We'd get smacked if like, you can't dial anything that doesn't have more than, or that does have more than 7 digits. And even then you had to kind of stay within your prefix if you could. But I happened to see the number recently, 22 billion robocalls so far this year, and we're on track for 54 billion robocalls by the end of 2021.
I thought that the FCC was doing something about this. Apparently not.
It's funny that we're talking about this now, because at the end of this month, which is tomorrow, that Stir and Shaken are supposed to be enforced by law.
This is an authentication protocol for phone calls. Yeah.
Yes. The problem is it only authenticates between carriers that support it. But if there's an external carrier that sends calls into the system, then it's we're back to the weakest link, which is why the AT&T Active Armor hopefully will help people. Anyway, I gave our picture of the week the caption, "Why place an arbitrary lower bound on Windows 11 minimal requirements?" And the picture is our beloved Windows 95 desktop. And this is a completely spoofed picture, because the PC health check will not run. It won't even run on my Windows 7 machine, which I'm talking to you from right now. But anyway, this was just somebody took the time to mock this up, which I got a kick out of. With apparently running the PC health at a glance, showing a 32 megabyte. Not gigabyte of RAM, a 1 gig hard drive, also showing 25 years old, and then apparently someone checked the whether or not this machine would be able to run Windows 11. That is the Windows 95 machine, and lo and behold, no. It says this processor isn't supported. It's probably an 8386. For Windows 11, so darn. Anyway, we'll be coming back to that as a consequence of much activity in the last week.
Oh, it's been
on
crazy,
the topic.
Yeah.
Oh, my Lord, yes. Okay, so here's a true interesting story. On June 3rd, so the beginning of the month, what's that, like a little over 4 weeks ago, a team of a little over 3 weeks ago, a team of non-Russian speaking hackers who call themselves Cyber Explorer were searching for vulnerabilities on the Russian site mail.ru. and probably not hard to find. Mail.ru is wisely one of HackerOne's many bug bounty program clients. And these enterprising hackers were hoping to pay the rent. Their tool of choice for web application security testing is something known as Burp Suite, which they run on their browser of choice, which is Firefox. The trouble was the web subdomain of mail.ru that they were needing to poke at, and it was shown as redacted in the stories that I was, where I was trying to pull this information together. The mail subdomain was all in Russian, which none of them spoke. They knew that Chrome would do translation for them, but they didn't want to use Chrome. So they went looking for Firefox extensions to perform the Russian language translation. But they soon discovered, when looking for a translation extension, that a great many of them had been removed due to critical security vulnerabilities. And in thinking about this further, they realized that any page translator would need to have direct and deep access into the web page's DOM, the document object model. In other words, it's due to the fact that all these had been removed because of security problems, they realized that it's very difficult to make a translator fully secure, and conversely, very easy not to. So one of the members of the team had previously found multiple vulnerabilities in other Microsoft products, so they had some experience in dealing with Microsoft. And what captured their attention was that Microsoft's Edge browser now had built-in translation. That was something that had been added a while ago. And since Edge also has a bounty program, they figured they might be able to get their rent paid. So they decided to switch to Edge.
It's such a funny story.
It's great.
It's got to be like a 12-year-old script kiddie, right? I mean,
yeah. It's like let's see if we can make some money.
Okay, let's see now.
So they switch to Edge. They go back to the Russian site, and they use Edge's built-in translator.
Yes.
They were immediately swamped with cross-site scripting error pop-ups. They didn't quite believe it. So they did the same thing with Chrome using its built-in Russian translator. No pop-ups. So Chrome's translation system appeared to be secure, whereas Edge's was looking like a total meltdown. So they began digging into Edge, and they quickly discovered that Edge's translator was failing to properly sanitize HTML image tags. This allowed them to provide their own malicious JavaScript, which would run in the context of the origin domain. In other words, you could take over any site that you visited, if you like, with Edge and a little bit of tweaking. So as web browser security bugs go, it doesn't get much worse. In fact, it's so bad that they realized that they had found a class of cross-site scripting problems known as UXSS for universal cross-site. Too bad it's not G for gourmet. Anyway, it's universal cross-site scripting. They then verified that anyone accepting a friend request on Facebook could be compromised, that web-based applications, for example, Instagram, published on the Windows Store would also be vulnerable because the Windows Store operates under the same Microsoft Edge translator that was responsible for triggering this universal cross-site scripting attack. And as regards to paying the rent, their story had a happy ending. Edge is now significantly more secure, and Microsoft replied, quote, "Thank you for taking the time to share your report. Based on the assessment of our engineering team, we have determined that your case, number 65633, is eligible for a U.S. $20,000 bounty award under the Edge on Chromium bounty program. Congratulations. So they published.
Very
Isn't
nice.
that great?
Yeah.
They published their timeline on the 3rd of June.
See, it's good not to know Russian.
Yeah, it comes in handy.
Comes in handy.
On the 3rd of June, they sent the report to Microsoft. On the 7th, 4 days later, a reply from Microsoft saying that they were reviewing their June 3rd report. The next day, additional impact information was sent. On the 15th, report was triaged. The 17th was the notification that they had been awarded a $20,000 bounty. 2 days later, on the 19th, a pre-release patch was issued. And then on the 24th, last Thursday, the patch update was pushed. A CVE was assigned. So that's not too bad. Microsoft was first notified on the 3rd, and the bug was patched and pushed out exactly 3 weeks later. As I said, last Thursday on the 24th. So that's not, that's not the 3 days, which appears typical or at least possible for the Chromium team, but it sure beats the catastrophic 3 months during which Microsoft apparently twiddled its thumbs before publishing a patch for the Exchange server proxy logon flaw, which, gave us all of our excitement toward the beginning of this year. So, a happy ending. These guys got their rent paid. It paid off to poke around. And I'll just remind our listeners that some of these problems are not hard to find. You just have to kind of try stuff and use something that does web application security checking. There are a bunch of free tools and open source tools available for that. And just do things. And when stuff happens, then, pursue it. And maybe you'll be able to pay your rent too.
That is really a lot of exploit discovery is just trying things, right?
Yes. The automated version of that we call fuzzing, right? And the human, but you can also fuzz as a human. You could just do things that the fuzzers, won't do because they haven't been aimed at it, and it's things like this. It's like trying combinations that haven't been tried before. It's sad, but that's pretty much all it takes to find like something that crashes or something that pops up and wait a minute, this looks like a cross-site scripting vulnerability. Explore this further because it's unfortunate that the security industry is, or the security of the industry is currently at this state where, just do something. and you might discover a vulnerability and make several tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're not yet FLoC'd. Of course, I had to title this that. The future of user profiling remains uncertain. Now, as our listeners will recall, back near the start of COVID, the very clever Bluetooth-based privacy-enforcing exposure notification device proximity tracking technology, which was jointly designed and developed by Apple and Google, was met with skepticism. No one understood it, so in the immortal words of the Monty Python troupe, run away! And Amazon's recent rollout of their beautifully designed, triple encrypted, multi-layered tunneling, low bandwidth sidewalk technology was greeted with hysteria by the popular press, claiming that it allows your neighbors to use your Wi-Fi. Gasp! A well-meaning, non-technical friend of mine phoned warning me to disable sidewalk immediately. And of course, those of us who share this podcast know that's not at all what it is. Meanwhile, Reality Check hundreds of millions of people are blithely plugging all manner of inexpensive IoT devices into their home networks, joining them to their internal LAN Wi-Fi, whereupon those devices immediately connect back to servers in politically hostile foreign lands, over which there is absolutely zero oversight or security. But trust in Apple, Amazon, and Google, who are all carefully designing super secure solutions? Oh no, run away. In a similar vein, I was, and I continue to be, enamored of Google's FLoC technology. Yes, warts and all. If we must have user browser history profiling, it seems to me that being tagged with an amorphous and periodically changing interest-based cohort identifier beats the hell out of having everyone carrying unique third-party cookies around, which uniquely and statically identifying them individually, rather than as merely a faceless member of an amorphous cohort. I would far prefer that legislators simply outlawed all forms of online profiling. We know that the EFF will be satisfied with nothing less, but that doesn't appear to be close to happening. And just like the $5 IoT devices which connect to cloud servers located in hostile countries, many people are missing the forest for the trees, because let's not forget that these days most of us are already being identified by a highly static 32-bit identifier known as an IP address. Some identity blurring occurs thanks to multiple machines located behind NAT routers having a single public IP address. But if IPv6 ever succeeds in giving each and every endpoint its own IP, which is its goal, that blurring will also disappear. So I wanted to briefly revisit FLoC today because, as with those other well-conceived and explicitly well-designed solutions, Google's FLoC has landed with a hard thud. Not one other browser has agreed to adopt FLoC, including those that are based on Chromium's own open-source codebase, Brave, Edge, Opera, and Vivaldi. And Firefox, not based on Chromium, is also a definite no thank you. A recent analysis by Digiday discovered that Amazon is already preemptively blocking Google's cookie-free solution across its various web properties, including Whole Foods, Zappos, Shopbop, and Goodreads. So, as a result of all of the FLoC pushback, the reason we're talking about it today is that Google recently updated their rollout timeline, which is putting it politely, announcing that they would be delaying FLoC's wider rollout from its originally planned usage starting early next year to now late year after next, meaning somewhere toward the end of 2023, and I don't know how they arrived at that.
South the 12th of never, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's the case. And perhaps not coincidentally, Google has also been hit with some new regulatory setbacks in the EU after the European Commission opened a wide-ranging investigation into Google's digital advertising business to examine its, quote, plans to prohibit the placement of third-party cookies on Chrome and replace them with the Privacy Sandbox set of tools, unquote, meaning FLoC, and assess its, quote, effects on online display advertising and online display advertising intermediation markets, unquote. So it sure sounds to me as though there's some moneyed political lobbying going on behind the scenes there. In a similar move, earlier this month, the UK's Competition and Markets Authority, their CMA, announced that it's taking up a, quote, role in the design and development of Google's privacy sandbox proposals to ensure they do not distort competition, unquote. So again, there are clearly some powerful forces behind this, legislative saber rattling. Of everything that is happening, the third-party cookie stovepiping that was introduced in Firefox 86's strict privacy mode is the best solution until something better comes along. By breaking the browser's traditional single shared cookie store into individual stovepiped per domain cookie stores, third-party cookies will continue to be honored in Firefox in exactly the way they were originally designed to be. But when a user who received a third-party cookie in one domain then visits a different domain, that third-party cookie from the same third party will not be returned. Rather, it will be given a different cookie for that stovepiped first-party domain. So, this may be the solution. And of course, the problem is that we have fingerprinting and, other sorts of persistent storage that those that want to track us are using. And of course, the fact that even with Firefox's solution, the fact that all of those various queries will still be coming from the same IP means that all of that fancy dancing we're doing in the browser, whether with cookies or fingerprinting or FLoCs, amounts to very little. While we run around in circles, the tracking companies are probably chuckling because they're thinking, hey, we got the guy's IP, and that's not changing very often. So we know what they're doing, even when they try to, bob and weave. Okay. This headline brought me up short, and I thought, what? The headline was Irish ransomware attack recovery cost estimate. $600 million.
What?
I know.
Crazy.
$600 million. It's like, how expensive were those servers? And did they melt? Like what? So, back in the middle of last month, Leo, you'll remember, it was about 6 weeks ago, we covered the news that Ireland's national health system, known as the HSE, that stood for the Health Service Executive, was hit by the Conti ransomware gang.
I remember, yeah.
Yep. And this forced them to take their entire national healthcare IT infrastructure offline. Also recall, not only that so not only was the Conti gang demanding, it was an odd amount. It was $1,000 shy of $20 million in ransom. And what is that, like there's some limit that gets triggeed or some transaction limit? Who knows why? But
you get a little discount. You get the
that's right.
Yeah,
So it was $1,000 shy of $20 million that they wanted, figuring that they'd hooked a big fish. And then, remember, Ireland's Prime Minister himself declared that no ransom would be paid. And not only that, in something that was a little curious, the High Court of Ireland then issued an injunction against the Conti ransomware gang, whom they couldn't find, demanding that the 700 gigabytes of stolen HSE data be returned and neither sold nor published, And further, that once having done that, the members of the gang identify themselves by revealing their full and true names, their email addresses, and their physical addresses, then come to Ireland to turn themselves in to Irish law enforcement immediately.
And you must turn yourself in
This
immediately.
is the High Court of Ireland. We shall not be denied. Right. Well, today we have an update on the situation in Ireland. First off, it will surprise no one to learn that the Conti gang members, doubtless based in Russia, were somehow able to resist the urge, the compulsion to comply with the Irish High Court order, and that all gang members, as far as we know, remain unidentified and are still at large. What has surprised many, however, is that Paul Reed, the HSE's Director General, has estimated the recovery costs to total $600 million.
Wow, maybe they should have paid, you know? Jeez.
Well, actually, this is not even for the key. It was given to them.
Oh.
So yes. So upon closer examination, the great majority of that appears to be more than just recovery. During the hearing, which was last week, Reed noted that the immediate cost of recovery would total $120 million, which, okay, is still far more than the $20 million requested in ransom. Reed stated that further investments in replacing and upgrading the affected systems and other expenses, he said, which a real question mark in my mind, would bring the total cost to an estimated $600 million. Now, I'd sure love to see an itemization of that. He predicted it would take months for HSE to fully recover from the attack. Among the many expenses was the cost of hiring technical experts. Okay, maybe I'm for hire. I hadn't considered this before.
Yeah, that's some good money in there.
If he's got $600 million he needs to find a place for, I might be able. Well, no, not until after SpinRite 6.1. Don't worry. But,
okay, thank you.
Yeah. Apparently, they're in no hurry to get this thing fixed. So, anyway, Reed said, "quote We have also engaged international expertise." Okay, they didn't phone me. There are costs we will incur in the future, and we need to put in place a security operations center. Apparently it's going to have like lots of big screens, Leo, very impressive, to monitor our network on a more comprehensive basis. Yeah, maybe that would be a good idea. So it does sound more as if he's softening them up for his forthcoming budget. He also reported that so far, HSE has decrypted 75% of the affected servers. Despite threats from the Conti group to leak the hacked stolen data, HSE stuck to the Prime Minister's refusal to pay and instead forwarding all the information they had about the attack to Ireland's National Cybersecurity Center. And then, a week after the attack, the Conti gang provided a decryptor, which Irish officials began testing. So, much as has happened in other major attacks where the gang suddenly realized, oh crap, we stepped in a big one here. Let's just let's try not to get, to have Putin's goons come after us. We're going to try to be a little socially responsible after the fact. What's interesting is that a week after the attack, they provided them with a decryptor. The decryptor has been used to decrypt 3 out of 4 of the affected servers. Yet they're saying that, this really hurt, and we're going to need $0.6 billion right? $0.6 billion to recover from this. So I guess they're going to get some really pretty shiny new servers, Leo, and maybe a big network operations center with big, those screens where you've got little blinky lights all over the map showing connections and things. It's, it's got to be like what they have on TV for that much money.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Crazy. Maybe they're just throwing everything out and starting over.
It may be that their stuff, is really old and they're able to make a case for like, look, we can't fix it. We got to replace it. Maybe, Leo, they had a bunch of Western Digital MyBook NAS devices.
Jeez.
So I titled this next one, Dude, Where's My Data? Last Friday, Western Digital posted the following. They said, Western Digital has determined that some, I love that, turns out maybe 55,000, but we'll get there in a second, that some MyBook Live and MyBook Live Duo devices are being compromised through exploitation of a remote command execution vulnerability. In some cases, the attackers have triggered a factory reset that appears to erase all data on the device. We are reviewing log files which we've received from affected customers to further characterize the attack and the mechanism of access. The log files we've reviewed show that the attackers directly connected to the affected MyBook Live devices from a variety of IP addresses in different countries. This indicates that the affected devices were directly accessible from the internet, which of course they were designed to be, either through direct connection or through port forwarding that was enabled either manually or automatically via UPnP, which again, they were designed to do. Additionally, the log files show that on some devices, the attackers installed a Trojan with a file named .nttpd, 1-ppc-be-t1-z, which is a Linux ELF binary compiled for the PowerPC architecture, which is used by the MyBook Live and Live Duo. A sample of this Trojan has been captured for further analysis and has been uploaded to VirusTotal, and it lights up like a Christmas tree. They said, our investigation of this incident has not uncovered any evidence that Western Digital Cloud Services, firmware updated servers, or customer credentials were compromised. Well, okay, no evidence, but we'll see that it's completely possible. They said, as the MyBook Live devices can be directly exposed to the internet through port forwarding, the attackers may be able to discover vulnerable devices through port scanning. Yeah, that did happen. Then they finish. We understand that our customers' data is very important. Okay. We sold them something to store it, after all. They said, we do not yet understand why the attacker triggered the factory reset. Okay, well, there's lots of speculation on the internet. However, we have obtained a sample of an affected device and are investigating further. Additionally, some customers have reported that data recovery tools may be able to recover data from affected devices, and we are currently investigating the effectiveness of these tools. The MyBook Live series was introduced to the market in 2010, and these devices received their final firmware update in 2015. Okay. End of posting. So they had a 5-year maintenance life after they were introduced to the market in 2010. So what we have here is an unfortunate situation. We have an instance of long abandoned IoT NAS devices continuing to be used for 6 years past their end of support life. You can't really blame Western Digital for retiring support after 5 years. It's their right to do so. Much as we've said, it's, Microsoft's right to just decide, okay, we're not going to keep supporting Windows 7. Sorry about that. Well, maybe if you pay us, we will, but most of you know. Nor, with two important exceptions, can you really blame the users of those apparently perfectly well-functioning NAS devices for continuing to use them. They appeared to be working well the day after their support ended, and even a year after their support ended. And this reminds me of an experience I had as a youngster, definitely at the end of my teen years. I was responsible for paying for my car insurance, and I received a notice that my insurance had lapsed. I was horrified, but I was also hungry.
Sounds
and
familiar.
I wanted to go, yeah, doesn't it? And I wanted to go get some food.
Yeah.
So, Leo,
What'd you do?
I got in my car,
Yeah.
and to my amazement, it still ran. Even without insurance.
No insurance, and it works.
I guess it didn't know. And neither did those Western Digital MyBook Live NAS devices know that their support had ended. They just kept on running.
Yeah.
Now,
And
the
it's
plot
6 years
thickens.
ago or something. I mean, a long time ago. Yeah.
Exactly. It was 6 years ago. Now, the plot thickens a bit when 3 years after that end of support, in 2018, a serious remote command execution vulnerability was found and made public. The flaw was assigned a CVE of 2018 18472, which NIST, the NIST, described as, quote, Western Digital WD MyBook Live and WD MyBook Live Duo, all versions, have a root remote command execution bug via shell metacharacters in the /API/1.0/REST/language_configuration language parameter. It can be triggered by anyone who knows the IP address of the affected device. Okay, in 2018, lay it out. There it is. The problem was first identified by WizCase in a 2018 report titled Vulnerabilities Found on Western Digital MyBook, Netgear Stora, Seagate Home, and Median Live Cloud NAS. WizCase's report begins, NAS devices have become the storage device of choice for many small and medium businesses. They're inexpensive, easy to operate, and you can add additional storage if you're running low on space. But is it secure enough to protect your company's data? That was the question on our mind when we brought in two security researchers.
Is there an alarm going off?
I have what do you know? Spam.
You have a spam alarm? If I had a spam alarm, it would never stop going off.
So they said they brought in two security researchers, they said, to see whether they could exploit any vulnerabilities in the leading NAS devices. We focused on, and remember there were those four. We focused on discovering only critical vulnerabilities that can be exploited remotely without any user interaction, meaning authentication bypasses weren't enough. We wanted to execute commands on the devices remotely with the highest privileges. We were successful in every device. So at the time of this, Leo, all four of those NASs were remotely exploitable with root remote privileges. They said in all four NAS devices tested, all 4 NAS devices tested suffer from a 0-day unauthenticated root remote command execution vulnerability. The vulnerabilities allow hackers, governments, or anyone with malicious intention to read files, add, remove users, add, modify existing data, or execute commands with highest privileges on all of the devices. They finished, it's our belief that there are many other NAS devices that suffer from similar vulnerabilities. Both the vulnerabilities then that they were dubbed 2018 18472 and 18471 remain unpatched at the time of this publication. And this was 3 years in the case of the WD, 3 years after the device went out of support. They said there are nearly 2 million affected devices online. That was then, 2018. So we don't know how many of those nearly 2 million online NAS devices were WD MyBooks at that time. That was 2018, and now we're 3 years later. What we do know is that finding such devices has never been easier. The public internet can be scanned, and it has been. A very recent count revealed 55,348 Western Digital MyBook Live devices located, identified, known to be connected, and publicly accessible across the internet. So, following last week's destruction derby, we need to collectively ask ourselves where the blame falls. Those forensically reviewing the logs have suggested that the owners of the WD NAS devices may have been caught in the crossfire between 2 warring groups. Given the detection of a Linux Trojan on the device, it was a PowerPC based Linux Trojan. It seems that most of those WD NAS devices that were still in use had been found and commandeered into the service of a botnet years ago.
So they had actually, probably since 2018, when that exploit was published, been co-opted but sitting passively.
Exactly. The users had no idea. It behooved those running the botnet to have those things stay on the net so that they could be used for DDoS attacks and scanning for other things on the net and so forth. So it's believed that their subsequent destruction via a factory reset wiping may have been the consequence of a rival group wishing to shut down a rival botnet.
It's just hysterical.
So all of this lost data occurred as a side effect, as I said, caught in the crossfire between 2, warring groups. So I did say before, with 2 important exceptions, can you really blame the users of those apparently perfectly well-functioning NAS devices for continuing to use them?
No.
Those 2 important exceptions are, first, is it safe to continue to use anything that's connected to the internet after its ongoing maintenance support has ended? Okay, that's a good question. At the same time, is it really practical to expect users of an expensive piece of equipment that's apparently working perfectly well to stop using it just because support, which it apparently doesn't need, is no longer available?
By the way, I think Amazon's still selling them. I mean, believe it or not. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I can buy one for $373. If you want it delivered by Friday, $399. So these are just some old computer stores who had some stock, and they're still selling them, which is depressing as hell.
It is. Secondly, we know in this day and age that anyone who is not maintaining multiple, and this is what I heard you mention when you were talking about this on a previous podcast, anyone who's not maintaining multiple backups of their important data is inherently placing that data at risk. After last week's disaster, many people were posting that they were totally hosed by the loss of 2 terabytes of irreplaceable data. Many years ago, I designed an advertisement to which, to my surprise, won some acclaim at PC Magazine for being the most responded to advertisement in the magazine's history to that point. That ad began with the simple headlines, "Hard disks die." Then it posed the question, "Ever wonder why?" The point being that all mass storage systems are in a perpetual battle against the forces of entropy. And in the end, entropy will win. It always does. As we know, nature abhors a sharp edge. So it would be nice to think that Western Digital might have sent their registered owners of those drives a notice in 2018 warning them to take those drives offline because a critical remote compromise problem had been identified and would not be repaired since the drives were now 3 years out of service, out of warranty, out of maintenance. I would be surprised if that had happened, but, Western Digital had moved on by then, 3 years earlier, to newer devices. So I guess I'd conclude that the responsibility falls on the users of those systems. They were obtaining many years of continued service life from an out-of-maintenance device. And in the cases where they were screaming about losing valuable information, it was probably going to happen sooner or later anyway. So, oops. Maybe lesson learned. But Leo, your point about these things still being available for sale.
Yeah, it's fairly shocking, isn't it? I can't believe
it's horrifying.
Yeah.
It's horrifying.
Yeah. And Western Digital abandoned these. I mean, really abandoned them. Hard abandoned. Because they knew there was a critical exploit in 2018 and did nothing.
Yeah.
But I think, you should make sure everything you have is being updated, preferably automatically over the air, and not use stuff that is out of date. But that's easy to say. The people who are buying these are buying them at big box stores, and it's a big hard drive, and they're using it for backup. And
it's got a brand name. I mean, Western Digital is a great name, so they're probably thinking, "Hey, Western Digital, that's great." Wow.
It's too bad.
How big? A couple of terabytes?
The one I can buy right now for that $383 is 3 terabytes. So
nice.
3 terabytes. And just because it's labeled backup, people go, "See, it's backed up," and then erase the original. Before you go into this next story about John McAfee, I do want to tell people what you're about to hear might be triggering if you're considering suicide. There is a national suicide prevention lifeline in the United States. You can call right now for free and get free confidential support if you're in distress. Great crisis resources for you or your loved ones. It's 1-800-273-TALK, 1-800-273-8255. We just want to be responsible since we're going to talk about John McAfee next.
That's good. And we know that COVID has been an extra stressor for people.
Especially teenagers. I know of 2 teenagers who took the very poor choice because of loneliness during COVID. So, we're all going through it, but you don't have to go through it alone. And if you're not in the United States, you can Google Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and you'll be able to find one in your area.
Good.
We don't want to lose you. We want you to be around. Anyway,
I was unhappy when I was younger, and
it's normal. And that's the problem with
glad
suicide. It's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Things do get better. I know, and but sometimes we just can't take it, and don't do it. Don't do it.
So I wanted to note that last Wednesday, John McAfee was found dead by hanging at the age of 75 in his jail cell in Barcelona, Spain. His extradition to the United States, where he would have been facing a number of legal charges of willful tax evasion, had finally been approved by a court in Spain. And despite his earlier statements that he would never take his own life. And he said that foul play would definitely be involved if he ever appeared to have done so. Everyone assumes that he changed his mind and that must have been what happened. His attorney said that his 9 months in prison had brought him to despair, and attempts to revive him had failed. And as we all know, John was a character and a half, with a life full of antics. I think that the first time we talked about him on this podcast was when he was being sought in connection. Of course, he was famous, right, because of McAfee and McAfee Systems and McAfee AV.
Yeah.
I didn't realize he had some connection to Zone Alarm, which was a little horrifying.
Yeah,
for me.
Well, but back in the day, I think he was quite a bit more respectable. He made $100 million selling McAfee to Intel.
Yeah.
So he did quite well, but as far as we know, he squandered almost all of it in kind of oddball
and things went weird too. I think the first time we talked about him was when he was being sought in connection with the murder of his neighbor, a guy by the name of Gregory Fall, F-A-U-L-L.
In Belize.
Yes. Yeah. He was his next door neighbor in Belize. This neighbor had been found dead, shot in the back of his head with a 9mm. And prior to that, Gregory had previously confronted John after one of John's quite aggressive dogs had bitten someone in the area, and the dogs were apparently known to get loose and run in packs, terrifying the community. So, he was a source, McAfee was, of adventure and controversy.
Adventure is a good word for it, yeah.
In his earlier years, he had worked at NASA, Xerox, and Lockheed Martin before launching the world's first commercial antivirus software in '87. And in fact, he and I interacted just once by phone.
Well, that's what I was curious if you had met him. Yeah.
It was before his launch of McAfee AV. After I had written a series of 3 columns in InfoWorld, which he was reading, which imagined with as much detail and accuracy as I could exactly how a theoretical software virus would behave.
Oh, interesting.
And I don't recall now how clear I made it that this was conjecture, but a quite animated John McAfee, who was unknown by the PC industry at the time, phoned my office wanting to compare notes and virus samples. He was sure that, and amazed to discover that I had viruses, clearly, because I had exactly described the behavior of the viruses he had. And he was very disappointed to learn, and actually it took me some time to convince him and talk him down, and I'm unsure that I ever really did. I think he didn't really believe that my 3-column series about software viruses was entirely written from my imagination as a software developer, not as a virus discoverer. Anyway, I said, sorry, John, I'm really, I don't have any. If I was a virus, this is how I would behave. And he's like, really? Oh, well, I thought we could, I'd show you mine if you showed me yours. So anyway,
I saw some stories about him fairly aggressively calling people to get information or copies of viruses. He was working at Lockheed when he got a copy of the Brain in the late 80s and started writing McAfee. But, I think he wanted to write an antivirus, but he needed to understand what it was he was blocking, what he was preventing.
Yeah.
Did a good job. It worked, right?
It's funny you mentioned that, Leo, because I was thinking the same thing this morning. Okay, we know how they work now, so would it have been behavior-based? It's hard to imagine it would have been signature-based, because what?
There weren't any. There were 4 or something, yeah.
Right, exactly,
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So, crazy.
He probably was trying to come up with heuristics so that you could watch for a certain kind of behavior. That's the ideal way to do it, signatures plus heuristics. but I don't know.
Yeah. And we didn't have an internet back then, so
Right.
they had to jump from floppy
You
to
had to
floppy.
send them a floppy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, John, I got one. It's on a floppy here.
We didn't have USB. We didn't have thumb drives. All we had, the only thing that was transportable was diskettes.
Right.
And so the viruses, such as they were, had to be very tiny. I think I remember that some of them lived in track 0 because there was still, I think there was still cylinder alignment. So I think there was space on track 0 after the boot sector. And so you'd have, I remember boot sector viruses. I mean, they had to be
That's right.
really, really small.
So if you put it, what you do is you put it on the boot sector of a floppy, and if somebody booted that floppy, attempted to boot from that floppy, it would infect their system. This is pre-hard drives, or did it have hard drives? Okay.
Oh yeah,
Jump to the hard drive.
If they had a hard drive,
Right.
or it would go into RAM and then move on to any other diskettes
floppy
that,
you used
that
Yes,
they then
that's
stuck
right.
in.
Yeah.
You know, and before you knew it, I mean, and I remember there were like red floppies that were infected
Yes.
that researchers
Yes.
were like
Don't touch.
were like using.
Don't
Yes.
touch. Yes.
Wow. Okay, so a fun topic, and one that is up in the air. Where exactly will Windows 11 run? And the subtitle is "Don't Ask Microsoft because they have no clue."
They've actually changed the story several times already.
God, I know, Leo. What a mess. So, okay, the trouble is there's no difference between Windows 11 and Windows 10, and everyone knows it. It's the same operating system, so Windows 11 can run anywhere that Windows 10 runs, unless Microsoft chooses to place what you'd have to consider somewhat arbitrary limits on where they will allow Windows 11 to run. And there's just no way that's going to go down well. On my own lovely Intel NUC that I was just talking about last week, which is a fast 4-core Intel i7 6700 HQ Skylake processor with 32 gigs of RAM, a very large GUID partitioned NVMe mass store, and TPM 2.0, I received that screen on the show notes above saying this PC can't run Windows 11. It says the processor isn't supported for Windows 11. While this PC doesn't meet the system requirements to run Windows 11, you'll keep getting Windows 10 updates. Okay, so, right. So, for some reason, this perfectly reasonable, Intel NUC, i7 6700, perfect little machine, nope, won't run it. Now, it runs great in a VM. I am running it in a VM. So, okay, but apparently not natively. So, because there's no actual legitimate reason why Windows 11 cannot run everywhere and anywhere Windows 10 runs, Microsoft themselves hasn't yet decided where Windows 11 should be allowed to run. Their own most recent statement, as of yesterday, essentially admits this. They said, and I quote, "Today, we're releasing the first preview build of Windows 11 to the Windows Insider community," meaning that's not that earlier dev one we were talking about last week and the week before. This is it. Windows Insider community. They said, in support of the Windows 11 system requirements, we've set the bar. Okay, right? It's a bar. Where are we going to set it? We haven't decided yet. So, wait. If it's too high, you can't jump over it. If it's too low, then you don't have to jump very hard. So we've set the bar, and it's settable, for previewing in our Windows Insider program to match the minimum system requirements for Windows 11. Okay, so we've decided how much RAM you should have, how big your hard drive should be, those things. It's all variable, right? How many cores you should have. We think 2's enough. Okay, with the exception, they wrote, for TPM 2.0 and CPU family/model. By providing preview builds to the diverse systems in our Windows Insider program, meaning maybe other people, maybe Windows Insiders have NUCs just like I do. Wouldn't want to rule them out. Anyway, we will learn, they wrote, by providing preview builds to the diverse systems in our Windows Insider program, we will learn how Windows 11 performs. What a crock. Anyway, across CPU models more comprehensively, informing any adjustments to the bar, apparently, we should make to our minimum system requirements in the future. And I wrote here, what a load. Anyway, we look forward to the product feedback. Oh, they're going to get some. And Leo, and learnings. They're looking forward to the learnings. Yeah. Not one learning. We're going to have multiple learnings. Oh, baby, I guarantee you're going to have multiple learnings coming from this, as it's an important step, they wrote, to deciding where it should run, to prepare Windows 11 for general availability or perhaps limited availability this year. Thank you to the Windows Insider community for your excitement and feedback thus far! ! Oh, yes, it's already very exciting. Given the mess and confusion this is creating, and I loved you guys last week, Leo, talking about how, Paul, Mary, Joe were just shaking their heads. How could they have screwed this up anymore? It's their own OS. Anyway, they're getting blowback. They're going to be getting blowback. Okay, so here, Leo, I actually have a solution to this, believe it or not. I think that what should be done is obvious. There's a beautiful compromise available. Unlike Windows 10, Windows 11 should require that any available security technologies be enabled on any platform where it runs, but given that, it should run anywhere Windows 10 runs. In other words, both of the systems I routinely use have a TPM. One of them is version 1.2. That's the one I'm sitting in front of. The other is version 2.0, that Intel NUC. And there's nothing wrong with version 1.2. It works just fine. It's secure. But neither of those TPMs are enabled or initialized on my hardware. Both systems also offer secure boot, but neither have it enabled. Microsoft claims that their telemetry shows that they have seen up to a 60% reduction in malware when TPM-enabled features like Windows Hello and BitLocker encryption are used on supported devices. Now, it's unclear why that should be true at all, unless it's correlation and not causation, meaning people running with those security features enabled tend to also be more cautious and careful. But okay.
So that's an important point. TPM does not help you avoid malware.
No.
It's for things like BitLocker. It's a secure, basically hardware security chip, right?
It does when it is, yes, it's a secure, it's like a secure enclave. So if you have secure boot enabled, it will prevent a rootkit virus, for example, from getting into your system. Right. So that's useful. So it creates a secure anchor, and it verifies the signature of each item in a chain up to and including Windows is running. So that's what secure boot is securing, is like that whole process. They also said that devices using the new Windows driver model, meaning signed drivers, can achieve a 99.8% crash-free experience. And of course, that's apparently so long as you don't run Windows Update, which, as we all know, has the tendency of spoiling everyone's crash-free experiences. Okay, so if the price of allowing me to run Windows 11 on systems that can be run with greater security is simply turning on those features, which I haven't needed to or bothered to so far, that's a choice I will make. But tell me that I cannot run Windows 11 on a hardware where I know it can run just fine, well, good luck with that. You know, the machine I'm sitting in front of while we record this podcast is equipped with an older Haswell processor specifically because, remember, Microsoft originally threatened not to support Windows 7 after Haswell. So that forced me to immediately go get a Haswell-based system because I wanted to run Windows 7. They were later forced to backpedal on that one when corporate America refused to make the move to Windows 10, which no one wanted at the time. And corporate America insisted upon being able to run Windows 7 on more current hardware, so Microsoft ended up saying, okay, fine, because they could. So anyway, just to be clear, it seems... it will be really interesting to see how this plays out for the rest of the year. And, you know, we have 6 months, so there's time. To me, I would have no trouble if Windows 11 looked and said, hey, you've got a TPM, turn it on. And you can do, your system will do secure boot, turn it on. And, you know, make you do that in order to run Windows 11. That seems okay. But, you know, and there's been discussion of this for the last couple of weeks. The problem is TPM 1.2 is fine. And TPM, it first appeared on laptops. Many fewer desktops, older desktops, have it. And so I think the problem is there will be many desktops running Windows 10 where Windows 11 can run just fine. But if they stick to requiring TPM 2.0 and secure boot, those systems are not going to be able to run 11 for no reason. I mean, it's the same as Windows 10. It just has better looking icons and rounded corners. And boy, did you see the list of things they took out, Leo? That's really nice. They got rid of a bunch of the crap that nobody wants. Of course, Xbox is still there. But
so this is the thing that puzzles me, because you famously wrote the program Never 10 because you never were going to go to Windows 10. Now you're all upset because you can't go to Windows 11. But I'm a little confused. I actually thought the thing people would hate the most until the Microsoft event was this, that they centered the start menu. And I thought, oh, we're going to hear so much about it. Microsoft said, hold my beer, and came up with something to get people really incensed. You know, we'll wait and see. It may not. Yeah. They've already changed the specs a little bit. You know, and by the way, they changed that compatibility checker too without telling anybody. So I think they're going to be a little sensitive to the pushback. But it's funny. I mean, it is Windows 10, right? Just cosmetically different.
Yes.
Do you want it because it has? They took things out. Is that why?
Leo, you can if you click down a couple layers, you can still find a dialog from Windows 95.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's the same operating system.
No, that's absolutely the case. So, I figure I guess you can live without it. The only issue will be how long will they give you security updates for Windows 10? They've already committed to 2025, but they can extend that as well.
They can, and I've gotten used to 10. I had to make sure that Squirrel ran under 10. I run 7 and I run 10. New systems that I set up are all running Windows 10. All the laptops that Lori is using for her remote home neuro clients, they're all running Windows 10. I've made peace with it. I have no problem with it. I just think, we need to keep Microsoft honest. And, the idea of saying, oh, yeah, we're not going to let you run 11 on systems where it can, but we're not sure why.
It's Microsoft's real problem is communication. They just, for some reason.
They really stepped on it this time.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of, I have the next headline here. I titled "Why Not Win 11." There's a new piece of well-intended but very poorly written junk known as "Why Not Win 11." You can most easily find it by going to https://whynotwin11.org. But don't go to whynotwin11.com, which is a domain that was grabbed up by someone else who then ignored the author's pleas to synchronize with him. And don't go to http://whynotwin11.org, because that won't properly redirect you to GitHub. Okay, so the whole thing is a mess. I'm sure its author means well. It might even eventually provide some useful information. But you'll need to push past Chrome's and Windows malware alerts, because the app's compiled script is changing minute by minute as its author keeps trying to get it right, thus preventing the code from ever maturing and having the chance to earn a reputation, and the executable is unsigned. Since the app initially seemed useful, and since I could verify the safety of its operation from its source, I briefly toyed with offering to sign it for the guy, but having watched its subsequent implosion and mismanagement, GRC will never have anything to do with it. Lawrence at Bleeping Computer picked up on it and gave it a lot of attention last week, which brought a lot of attention to it.
We mentioned it on TWiT as well. Daniel Rubino plugged it. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so, and Microsoft, as we said, has tripped over themselves so that, creating a vacuum for it. And it may settle down. My sense is that ultimately Microsoft's own PC health check tool will be what people should use, but I wanted to make sure everybody knew about it. However, the coolest thing about why not Win 11 is that it made me aware of a very slick and quite capable 100% free Windows scripting tool and environment called AutoIt Script. And that's something that I wanted to put on our listeners' radar. I tweeted about it. I mentioned it in GRC's news groups. It got a bunch of people excited. AutoItScript.com, AutoItScript.com. It compiles quite capable scripts. The scripting language is Turing complete. It's a complete scripting environment. It compiles them into standalone and independent exes that do not require any .NET libraries. It runs under any edition of Windows. The language is extensive. It allows for Windows UI to be implemented to create quick Windows automation apps, and it includes a wonderful and complete 6.8 megabyte old-style compiled Windows help.chm file. The help file contains a clear description, tutorials, a language reference, a GUI reference. It's able to invoke COM objects in order to make that simple. It runs PowerShell. You can script run as events, completely script the like your existing Windows apps. It might be just the ticket for enterprise IT admins who need to quickly get something automated and pushed out without resorting to VB.net or something heavier. Anyway, I just wanted to make sure it was on everybody's radar. AutoIt script. I use one particular browser shortcut like crazy, and that's Control-L. It's universally supported. It takes you to and highlights your URL. And you can imagine while I'm putting the podcast together, because I've got links to everything in the show notes, I'm often needing to grab the URL that I'm looking at. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew about Control-L. It is just really, really handy.
It's good to remind people because I forget, and that is a very useful keystroke. Really useful. Yeah,
it just jumps you off the page to the URL and highlights it, so you can then
copy
Control-L
or replace
and
it.
Then exactly Control-C or Control-V if you want to copy over it and then go somewhere else. Also, for years there was a program. It was called Teleport Pro, which was my go-to when I needed to clone a public website. Sometimes you need to do that. And I'm sure that old-timers among us have sometimes needed to end up going to the web archive, trying to find something, like a link is broken because a site that we just assumed would always be there disappeared. There are a few reference sites that I use like crazy. And a couple times, one of them, there's one at, I think it's ctyme.com, it's got an instance of Ralph Brown's interrupt list. I'm sure, Leo, you remember the Ralph Brown interrupt list.
I don't. I wish I'd had that back in the day.
It's like the standard reference for everything. And because I'm working with SpinRite, I'm down in IRQs and interrupts and int10 VGA BIOS calls and things, and so I'm constantly using it. And a couple times over the last year, it's been offline for a while, and I've thought, oh crap, there are other sources of this. Ralph Brown is a professor at Carnegie Mellon, and he, back in the DOS days, he created, he began compiling this, and it just became the galactic standard. In fact, if you Google Ralph Brown, R-A-L-F Brown, so it's not, Ralph, R-A-L-F B-R-O-W-N interrupt list, you'll get a ton of hits on Google. Anyway, a couple days ago, I just thought, I have to copy this site just in case it ever actually goes away forever. What I used is my favorite now go-to website copy tool that, again, I just wanted to tell everybody about. I made it this week's GRC shortcut, so you can get to it with grc.sc/825. grc.sc/825. It's Sciotech web copy. It's completely free. I like this company. They seem to be good guys. It's donationware. If you like it, give them some money. They've been maintaining it for a while. This is one of several things they offer. Anyway, there's really not much more to say except to say it just works. It gets the job done. It does a good job of taking a public site and it's got all the bells and whistles you could want for don't go off site, don't go down more than N number of levels, don't bother pulling images, don't blah, 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 or whatever you want. It's also able to create a localized copy on your hard drive so that you then end up with a running copy of the site that was offline so that you never have to worry about something that you depend upon disappearing. So grc.sc/825. I have a page over in my forum. I have my own private forum where my blog is over at forums.grc.com. I have a page of my favorite things, and I'm trying to keep that current, and I added this to that page. So if you ever kind of remember that I had once mentioned something like what was that site for syncing? What was that sync thing? What was that web copy thing? Anyway, if you think of it, that you can check that page, and I am keeping it current. And a humble bundle.
You always call it a humble bumble. I think it's the funniest thing.
Humble bumble.
Yeah.
And that's bad because I created another shortcut, which is not bumble, it's bundle. So grc.sc/bundle. And I realized that from time to time, when bundles come up, I can simply change where that shortcut points. So the most recent bundle, it'll always be grc.sc/bundle. This is a cybersecurity bundle, Cybersecurity 2021 bundle by Pact Books. And here's what it's got. Looks like a bargain to me. $1 gets you 3 books: Mastering Azure Security, Cybersecurity Attacks, Red Team Strategies, and Metasploit 5.0 for beginners. $1. Okay? For $10, you add 8 more to that. CompTIA Security Plus, Cybersecurity Threats, Malware Trends and Strategies, Cybersecurity Attacks and Defense Strategies, Mastering Malware Analysis, Learn Kubernetes Security, Learn Wireshark, Mastering Python for Networking and Security, and Cyberminds. I have no idea what that one is. And then for an additional $8, for a total of $18, you get 13 more, totaling 24 books. Microsoft 365 Security Administration, AWS Certified Security, the Specialty Exam Guide, Learn Kali Linux 2019, Mastering Windows Security and Hardening, Learn Computer Forensics, Practical Mobile Forensics 3rd Edition, Practical Threat Intelligence and Data-Driven Threat Hunting, Digital Forensics and Incident Response, Mastering Linux Security and Hardening 2nd Edition, Practical Hardware Pen Testing, Ghidra. Is that how you pronounce it? Ghidra?
Yeah, that's that reverse engineering tool. Yeah,
yes, and it is not simple. So believe me, Ghidra software reverse engineering for beginners. We're all a beginner. I looked at that thing and it's like, woo!
Yeah, it's amazing.
AWS penetration testing and CISA, Certified Information Systems Auditor Study Guide. All of that for $18, and it's a charitable contribution. It's all being. Is it all going to charity? I think it's all going to charity.
A percentage goes.
A percentage.
Yeah,
a percentage to charity.
Yeah.
So anyway, grc.sc/bundle, BUNDLE, and I mean, even if some of those are not good, wow, $18. You know, there's got to be some good stuff.
They're all ebooks. You have to be okay with that, but that makes it easier to search them, so that's a benefit.
Yeah. And PDFs, you're able to search a PDF pretty quickly. Okay, 2 pieces of closing the loop feedback. A frequent and very useful Twitter DMer sent this. He said, RESN824, which of course was last week. He said, surely, quote, the role of commercial providers, unquote. And first of all, to remind people, you and I, Leo, were scratching our heads. That was something that, was it a Google person? Somebody was talking about the rate at which vulnerabilities were occurring, and he said, and he referred to the role of commercial providers. And we were thinking, what in the world is he talking about? Didn't make any sense. He said, surely it must be the commercial exploit vendors getting their hands on these rather than Google and the Chromium project. He says, I guess they have reason to believe at least some of these 0 days. Oh, yeah, that's right. It was in the context of 6 0 days so far this year on Chrome. No, in fact, there had been 6, and that was number 7, were being sold on the open market before exploitation started in the wild. So anyway, I wanted to thank him for that. I'm sure that's what the Chrome guy was referring to. And finally, Mementh tweeted, serious question, Steve. Windows 11 might require TPM. How TNO is it? Can I trust it to keep the secrets the NSA wants from me from getting out? Would you put info behind it that would cost you your life if it got broken? I can't recall what your opinion on it was, and I recall the drive you fixed was locked by it. I thought that was a great question to wrap this up. The answer is no. I did some digging during that week that I was, trying to come up with some way to unlock the contents of that BitLockered and TPM keyed TPM key protected drive to bypass it. What could I do? Turns out it's actually not difficult. The TPM chip, which exists in chip form when it's not bound into the to the Intel firmware, and I suspect it may be a different story when it is in the Intel chipset, but I'm not sure if it's part of a chipset and in an external chip in the family, then it may still be possible. The point is, the TPM chip when it's a standalone chip is on the motherboard, and it can have a digital signal analyzer hooked up to its pins, and its communication can be and has been decoded. So certainly the NSA knows how to do that. There's cool pictures. If you look at go to decrypt TPM in YouTube, you'll find some YouTube videos of people doing that. You use a digital digital trace, digital signal capture device, and out comes all these cool-looking little square wave signals, and that can be decoded. So, and the key will be moving across one of the pins, digitally encoded, and you can capture it and crack the encryption in the case of the TPM. So the secrets are being kept there, but unfortunately, they move over the wire, which is exposed. So not something that you could trust your life with. But a great question. Thanks for asking.
And I had to laugh because, and I thought of you, during the Windows 11 announcement, Panos Panay said, this is the most secure version of Windows we've ever made. And I thought, when have they not said that? But you mocked that. I remember when Steve Ballmer said that back with Vista or XP or one of the older
and because we know the story.
Right.
Security is only something that you can see that did happen in retrospect when nothing bad happened.
Right. You don't know until you put it out in the world, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Basically, you cannot prove a negative, and all you have is no evidence in the beginning
right.
of whether it is secure or not.
We did our best. You could say we did our best. We tried really hard.
Yeah, and we really thought that if we would only allow it to work on processors that you couldn't use till next year, then nobody would have a problem this year.
I suspect it really comes down to selling more PCs. Frankly, that's what we that's what we.
Isn't that sad?
That is sad. Yeah, yeah. But really, traditionally in the Windows environment, that's when you got a new version of Windows, is when you bought a new computer. I think most normal people don't upgrade. Windows 10 broke that mold by offering a free upgrade to everybody, but that's why they had to give it away for so long.
My older Apple devices still work, but they are slower than the newer Apple devices.
That's right.
I like right here is an iPhone 6 that I use because it's got this wonderful little
that
hole.
headphone jack.
I love that hole. Oh my
Missed
God.
that. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Now, and it's plugged in. The battery's still 100% good because I don't think it's ever been unplugged. Actually, it was in my pocket for a while, but I never let it discharge much because we know that lithium-ion batteries don't like it. Oh, and by the way, Leo, I heard you talking about your exploded Pixel 4.
Oh, so depressing. Yeah.
Yeah, I just had the battery in my iPhone 10, the iPhone X.
Swell up.
It was replaced last Friday because it was still working perfectly. It was funny too because I went to the Genius at the iPhones, at the Apple store, and he said, "Oh, this is never going to pass the diagnostic." I said, "Yes, it will." He said, "No." I mean, you could see
6.
all of the silver clips had it was like the screen had popped out of the backing.
Yeah.
And he ran their diagnostic. He says, "I'll be darned, works perfectly." I said, "I know,"
but
I said,
you need to replace it because it's going to explode if you don't.
Well, yes, I was worried that if I ever had to travel, the TSA would look at this and go, "We're not yet letting you on the plane."
What causes lithium-ion batteries to swell? Because they don't all.
It's overcharging and outgassing. So if you overcharge the cell, it produces gas, and the gas then causes the battery to expand and pushes everything else out.
Oh, interesting. And it seems to happen with age sometimes.
Yes,
and I think
because what happens is you end up with some little tiny. I can't remember now what the metal is. I don't think they're nichrome, but there's some little microfilaments which start to bridge, and that causes the chemistry to get a little freaked out, and then it begins to outgas.
So it's the Pixel 4 XL. It's not that old. It's a couple of years old. But and it's swollen enough that it pushed the back off. Yeah. I guess I probably shouldn't continue to charge it, right? That means it's time to either replace the battery or get a new phone.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, I actually have somebody.
You don't think it'll explode?
No, it won't explode.
Okay.
No.
So if you tried to jam it back together again, you might puncture it and then cause a fire. But if you just let it expand and let it expand naturally.
Well, and it's got nasty goo in it. You don't want to have
I know
that
it's
goo.
toxic. No, I know.
You don't want that goo coming out.
Yeah.
So I would just let it be a rocking horse.
Yeah,
for a while.
exactly. Not try to reattach the back, but just let it.
And if it's a good phone, for example, my iPhone 10 is going to a buddy of mine. Actually, it's the.
And I'm sure Apple replaced it, right? They replaced the battery. Yeah.
Yes, they replaced the battery. It cost $69 to do an out-of-warranty replacement, and it's as good as new. It's no scratches. It's gorgeous, and it still runs just fine. Yeah. But in the interim, I did get a 12 Pro, and it's so nice. It just, and this was my point, is it does run faster. And so I would have no problem if you chose to get new hardware because Windows 10 was no longer fast enough on old hardware, but it ought to agree to run if it really does run. I mean, if the technology hasn't been obsoleted.
You'd think. We brought this up. We've talked about this before because Microsoft some years ago said we're not going to support these pre-Haswell chips, as you mentioned. And that makes sense because they're doing, I think, a lot of coding and patching to the chip, and they don't want to support older chips, right? I understand.
Right. That absolutely made sense. It was, yes. And in fact, installing Windows 7 on a Skylake because Skylake chipset doesn't support the same USB drivers, and Skylake was only USB 3. If you had an older motherboard, you needed to you needed to get the USB 3 drivers for the motherboard and install them into the DISM image in order to get the thing to install. Because as soon as it would boot up, it would start the install, and then it would die when it tried to switch to its own drivers, which didn't work on your hardware. So you had to jump through some hoops, but I'm running it. It's like it works just fine. I've installed it on a number of machines like that. But yes, it certainly makes sense not to ask them to keep supporting older chipsets.
Yeah.
At some point.
At some point.
Sorry,
2 years later?
It's the same. It's the same as 10. I mean, it's running on all.
It is 10.
It is 10.
It is 10. I think it's time to replace, by the way, this iPhone I got
Happy birthday
14 years ago.
to iPhone.
Maybe it's time to replace this one. This one, ironically, the battery has never swollen on it. So 14 years later, the original iPhone. Steve Gibson, we're done.
We're
done. Great show.
Podcast.
Everybody should run out and buy SpinRite quick so you get the free upgrade to 6.1. He's working on it hard. By getting 6.0, you'll also participate in the development of 6.1, so that's nice. You'll find SpinRite at grc.com, the world's best hard drive maintenance, mass storage, maintenance, and recovery utility. We also invite you to go there for some unique versions of this show. Steve maintains a 16 kilobit audio version. For those of you who want it to sound like the original Thomas Edison gramophone.
Once upon a time, Elaine had a very slow satellite connection.
That's right.
And that's what started this.
That's right.
That it was burdensome. Oh, and she had a tight bandwidth cap. And so it was like,
that's really who it's for. Anybody who has a bandwidth cap doesn't want to spend extra bits and doesn't mind that it's a little scratchier. It's but it's a lot smaller.
I don't know, Leo. I think it turns out pretty much just the same.
Now, the transcripts are even smaller, and those are great. Elaine writes those, does a great job listening to our words and turning them into English prose. You'll find that and the 16 kilobit version and the 64 kilobit audio version at Steve's site, grc.com. While you're there, leave a question, a comment, a suggestion. Just praise at grc.com/feedback. You can also tweet him. He's at SGGRC on Twitter, and his DMs are open. We live at twit.tv, and that's where you'll find this show and all the shows we do, both audio and video. You'll also find a lot more interesting stuff, including Club Twit. If you go to twit.tv/clubtwit, you can support us with $7 a month. Get yourself ad-free versions of this show and all the shows we do, either audio or video. Access to our fabulous Discord channel. It's really a family thing in there. I love the Club Twit Discord. And, of course, the Twit Plus feed, which also has lots of great stuff that just didn't make it into the podcasts, pre- and post-show, things like that. Always love to have you in Club Twit. It really is a great way to support our enterprise, especially now that advertising is getting harder to come by. It really it bridges the gap, and we really appreciate it. Plus, it's a lot of fun. More information at twit.tv/clubtwit. I think that's about it. We'll see you next Tuesday, about 1:30 Pacific, 4:30 Eastern, 20:30 UTC. You can watch the live stream as we do this show and all of our shows at twit.tv/live. Thank you, Steve. Have a great week.
As we begin the second half of 2021.
Hard to believe.
Oh, I know.
I mean, I still feel like we're in 2020 in some ways.
Okay, buddy.
Take care.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that podcast episode. If you would like to check out more about tech news, then you should check out Tech News Weekly with me, Micah Sargent, my co-host Jason Howell, where we interview the people making and breaking the tech news every week.
Security now.